Hello for the soul community, Jen here with a quick tutorial on how to personalize your child's pose. Now, you find child's pose in almost every yoga class, and while it's very common, that doesn't necessarily mean that it feels good in everybody's body. So, let's take a few minutes to talk about this pose and, most importantly, find ways to refine and personalize it for you. Now, the props to have for today: a blanket and two blocks. So, just a reminder, your body is fantastically unique. We have our own bony structure, our movement history, different movement patterns and habits that we are either working with or trying to challenge in different ways. We all have unique things about our bodies that make our practice and our child's pose very personal. So it's like your handwriting, right? How you write out the word child's pose will look very different than everybody else's. And that's the same thing with your poses. But a key thing about our shapes is that there's no ideal, right, or set cues that works for everyone. So when you are embodying this shape, keep in mind that there's no right or wrong. Listen to your internal knowing to discern what is best for you. Now, let's start talking about knee flexion. So in child's pose, here is the kind of typical child's pose: arms in front, arms could be behind, maybe arms are underneath here. But regardless, this amount of knee flexion can feel like a lot for some people, some bodies. So, one way to help kind of support that a little bit and lighten that intensity is to take a blanket. You're kind of pulling it up towards those knee pits and allowing it to rest between the thighs and the calves there. So, finding your child's pose, there's a little bit more space for the knees. It can feel a little bit more comfortable, and then finding your shape that way. So that's one idea. Another way to kind of play with this knee flexion is to adjust how wide your knees are, right? So you can take a child's pose with your knees fairly wide that allows your belly to come a little bit closer down towards your mat. You can have knees fairly close, right? And the chest kind of drapes over. You can see my head doesn't really make it down towards the mat. So that's the next thing to go ahead and we'll chat about. So I like to have the head supported in child's pose for a couple of reasons there. So it allows the neck to relax, right? So if I'm kind of dangling, sometimes I'm keeping these tissues on and contracted. So you can take those hands, stack them on top of one another. You can even make fists here and allow that head to relax into that. You can also take a block and pull it underneath your forehead here. This is kind of cool because you can shift your head side to side, give yourself a little bit of a forehead massage, allowing the neck to move. Okay. Next thing to chat about: hip flexion. So this can be uncomfortable for some bodies as well. So we're going to use our blanket to give a little cush, just like we did with our knees. So you can fold that blanket as much as you'd like. Now you're going to find that your forehead is pretty far away from the mat. So from here you can go ahead and even lift that block up a little higher, and this might feel very comfortable. It could even be a variation to try if you'd like to make a little bit of space within that hip flexor space. So from here, just allowing the head to relax, allowing that pressure into the belly to relax the belly space. One of my favorite things to do in child's pose is to feel the movement of breath in the back of the ribs. right? About 60% of our lungs sit in the back of the ribs. So filling the lungs and expanding that back body, it's such a powerful place to do that. Okay, the last thing I'd like to chat about is shoulder flexion. So, very often, child's pose, people are asked to bring their hands up to the front of their mat. Now, while that is awesome, sometimes it can feel a little much for the shoulders, right? So let's play with how to change that up a little bit. So you can adjust, right, with blocks underneath your hands, just lightening that load a smidge on the shoulders. You can always bend the elbows to bring some relief, and you can find any kind of variation there, whatever that looks like for you. Now, the final thing that I'd like to talk about is puppy pose, and that's always a nice kind of alternative to child's pose in general, because you can notice as I bring the tush up just like a puppy, right? My tush is up in the air like a puppy. I'm bringing my hands forward and I'm allowing my forehead to come down towards the floor. So that really lightens the load on the flexion of the knees, flexion of the hips. It might be a little bit more on the shoulders, but you can always adjust those shoulders in all of those ways that we just talked about with that kind of child's pose, more classic child's pose shape. So, last thing. Maybe you need a little bit of support for that flexion within those shoulders. This is a beautiful way to kind of take puppy pose and find that nice opening in the chest. One thing I like to suggest, though, is to still keep some connection through that rib cage so you're not collapsing. You are finding that nice integration through the shoulders. So it's a bit more refined and intentional instead of just kind of sagging into those spaces there. All right, friends, all of those are beautiful options to take when an instructor says child's pose. So play, have fun, find what is best for your body, and enjoy. See you soon.